Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode we're finally going to get the replacement engine back into the engine bay of the Astra. But, and there's always a but, due to bad forward planning I managed to record about an hour's worth of video footage of the engine swinging on the engine crane and not me actually manhandling it back into the engine bay. But stay tuned because during the video I do give an explanation of how I actually managed to get it back in. So keep watching and I hope you enjoy. Okay, so I think we're just about ready to drop this engine back in the car now. It's all prepared as far as I can tell, think. Probably come across a couple of little things en route to putting it in. So it's suspended on the crane, engine bay's clear, so I've got aircon hosing out the way, fuel lead, vacuum hose for the servo, brake servo, that wiring out the way, that wiring out the way as far as I can get it. The drive shaft bit, or the output part of the gearbox, sits in here, and I have actually, you can see underneath there, put a block of wood in to wedge this away to give me a little bit more space. So I think it is the other side of that mount that this fits in. Hopefully, I'll just have a check on that on the engine actually. So I'm just looking down there. So that's the one that's going to go in, so the mount's going to be there. So we should be well clear of it. I think it goes that side of the mount. So the mount there, that face goes this side of the mount. So we should be well clear with that, I think. Might do coming a little bit further that way, but might stick a little bit more wood in that, pull that away. But anyway, essentially we are ready to put this back in the car. Right, so that went quite a lot easier than I thought. The engine is now officially back in the car. So what I've just been messing around doing now is putting the engine mount and the gearbox mount on this side, the one we couldn't get off to start with. So that's bolted onto the chassis. Needs talking down a little bit, but bolted onto the chassis, loosely fitted to the mount that's been refitted to the top of the gearbox. These two bolts, another one down the back. So that's now positioning the engine at roughly the right angle and in a roughly the right position. I'm just going to assemble the one this side on the engine. So the bolts are there, bolt holes are there. There's a big bracket that goes over. I think the other one's there. There's another one down the bottom somewhere, is there? I don't know, see where that is when we get the bracket. Let's go and get the bracket actually and line it up. Let's get this bolt out. What I've done is I've just taken the one off the other engine because again it's in a little bit better condition than this one was. Let's get that bolt out. So here's the engine mount, and that's got to sit. Oops. Sit there. Trying to see where the 3 bolt holes are. You can see 2. The other one's up there, so it sits just there, like that. There. So I think we can reach all those bolts, and then there's a bracket to go on the engine, on the frame of the car rather, which I think is 1, 2. Is there a third hole down there? No, I think it's just those 2 holes there and there. That needs to be bolted on, and then this bracket that we could bolt onto the engine can be bolted onto that, and the engine will be fixed in then, probably held in under its own steam. I'm just going to fit them all loosely for now, and then get the front. There's another mount got to go on the front there. So I've got to get the rubber mount off for that one because it gave me a bit more room getting the engine in and out. So that's got a bolt, one bolt through there, and then it bolts up here to the gearbox there's another hole down there. I think there's only two, might be three, and then there's 3 bolts to put in the back one, which you can't see from under here. You might be able to see it from here. Possibly not at the minute, but there's another engine mount right at the back, which, if you remember, when I took the engine off, I had to use masses of extension bars to get right through here, to get to it. It was easier than crawling under the car, but as it's cooler today and I've got a bit more patience, I might be able to do it from under the car, we'll see. But if we can get these 2 in, get the engine a little bit supported on a jack, we can get the crane out of the way, and then we'll have a little bit more room around here to work. So I'm quite pleased with how it's going. Would be really nice to try and start it today, but I don't know, we'll see. That might be another episode. So let's crack on. I'll put this engine mount in and then I'll show you how it all went together. Then we'll do the front one and then the one at the back. So that's the engine mount mounted to the engine. This bit is the other bit. There was 3 mounts on there. I missed the one at the top here. So if we look here, there's one there, one there and one there, and they correspond to that bolt hole, that one and that one. So that sits on something like that. But first, a good thing to notice is this aircon pipe actually goes underneath that mount, I think. So move that out of the way, drop him down there, and yeah, there's a clip there. Does that just go there? Yeah, I think that just mounts on there. It does go underneath there, but it just mounts on that Torx bolt there. This put here is a mounting for the air filter, so I'll put that on first and then put this big old engine mount on, and then we'll be ready to loose fit the bolts in here. So let's crack on with that. So we've now got the big mount in. As you can see, it is nowhere near, the engine is nowhere near lined up with where the mount goes. Now, useful thing to notice here is that because this is quite an old car, the alloy has corroded and it's left a nice ring where the washers for these big bolts have been sitting, and as you can see, there's a lot of play in those holes. You see them there. So the idea is you position the engine in line with the mount, so there's not too much tension on the mount. If there's too much tension, you can get a lot of vibration, or the engine knocking, or it'll prematurely ruin the mount will fail. So obviously what I've got to do is a little bit of jiggling about to get this hole lined up with that one, to get these bolts in. Shouldn't be too much of a problem because the engine is still swinging free on the crane. It's anchored at the other end by the gearbox, and then what we'll do is we'll get it lined up so that these bolts, these washers, fit in the centre of the holes. If they're off like that, then we know we haven't got it quite mounted in its original position. Obviously it's not the original engine, it's a different engine, but I'm sure they're designed to fairly close tolerances, so everything should line up alright. But that's what we're going to do now, so I'm going to get on and do that. Alright, so as you can see, with a little bit of jiggery pokery of the crane, a little bit of moving around, those holes are pretty much lined up now. I've got the flexibility now to, because the engine's still in the crane, to move it. So what we'll do now is we'll get the little bolts in their holes, or the big bolts in their holes, and then we can wiggle this about before we tighten them up, and get it to hold it in the right place. As you can see, I've now got the bolts in the holes, but they're clearly not lined up in the right place. But if we pull on the engine, we can line it up before we tighten them down. So that's what I'm going to do now, just so I'll show you that. So we've got the movement on the engine. I've raised it up a little bit so that I don't think we can get down there and see it, can we? Yeah, so that in here there's no gap now. So this is the bracket that's mounted to the engine. This is the bracket that's mounted to the car chassis. So there's no gap there now. That's all closed up, so that's up at the right height. So I'm going to make these adjustments, and then it will be on, I think, probably to the front one. Down there on that bracket. So I've just been looking back at some of the video footage I took, and it looks like that my other camera's memory card was full, and I didn't catch any of putting this engine back in the car, which is a real pain because I wanted to show you how it was done. So I'm just going to do a little quick overview of what I did. So I jacked the engine up so the sump was higher than the front of the car, and then wheeled it forward so it was over the hole, and then turned it slightly so that the back of the gearbox here was sort of over at this angle, and obviously the engine mount wasn't in. And then I lowered it, and there was just enough room to lower it to clear this chassis leg here. So obviously none of this engine mount was there. To clear this chassis leg, it dropped down in between there, and then I was able to push down here because the gearbox was here, was at that angle looking across. I was able to push it down to clear this bracket and swing it round underneath. And then once I got it into there, moved the engine crane over, pulled it back this way a little bit towards me, and the engine just seemed to drop into place, so it was quite easy to get back. And I suppose it took me, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour. But it's just a pain it didn't get caught on video because it's one of the main things. And I think back when I took the engine out, a similar thing happened, and I didn't catch or didn't record taking the engine actually out with the crane. But nonetheless, you get the idea, I think. The engine's still supported on the crane now, as you can see. That's because I've only got these two engine mounts in, this one here and this one over here. And we can see this one, we were talking about lining up the holes to get everything in the right place, and you can see that this one, you can see there, just there, isn't quite lined up, and these aren't tightened down yet, they're still finger tight, these three bolts. So what I'm going to do now is just shift it. You can see I can move it around on the crane there, move it that way. So what I'm going to do is just move this over and tighten these down now to get that nicely lined up, and then move on to the front mount. So you can see now I've got these tightened down, and they're lined up with where the marks were on the top of the mount originally, so where the clean bits were, they're covered up by the bolts. That might be a little bit out there, I don't know. I think it's alright, looks quite good. So next thing to do is to work on this one here. So this is the front mount, and there's a big thing here, this big chunk of metal with the rubber insert. That bolt through there mounts it on the bracket through there, and obviously these two holes here mount up onto the gearbox like that. So I'm going to do that one next. Right, so it's taken me about an hour jiggling around with the crane and the trolley jack underneath the gearbox and stuff to fiddle this around. But now you can see I have got pretty much, well, I've got all the engine mounts in and tightened down, and they're pretty much lined up with the marks that they were on before. So we've got that one down there, that's the front one. This one here is all done. I've been underneath and done the back one, right down the back there. I don't think you can see it. Done a couple of other little things, started to get a little bit carried away actually. So I've put the fuel line on, reconnected this vacuum hose here, which I think is part of the emissions control system. Put this one on, screwed this back into the manifold. That's the brake servo vacuum pipe. Was going to route this cable around here, but I've just remembered that I've put these two water hoses on as well, which might get in the way. I might have to whip them off again. But down here, that's your gear change mechanism, or where that gear change mechanism has got to connect onto. Right down, I don't know if you can see it there, just there is that little post where we got the other one was stuck on. And then on the gearbox there's two pivots, one there and one there, that the other end of the gearbox fits on. The other end of the gear change mechanism, sorry, there's only one pivot where the other end of the gearbox mechanism connects onto, and then it connects onto here. So what we need to do, I think, is we need to put that in, because you've got to wiggle this about, get it into various gears. I don't know what gear you're supposed to get it in. And then if you look at this little plunger, there's a little plunger down there, little spring-loaded plunger, right down in there. And what you do is you push that in, and when you get the gearbox in the right place, that should lock in and stay in. And then, if you can see right down there, there's a shaft sticking out, just there. Oh, get it to focus, there we go. So that is the shaft that comes through from the cabin. It has a gear stick attached to the other end of it. So you need to locate that into the connection on the linkage. So wiggle the gear change mechanism about and get that pin in, and then you put a drill or a pin in. We'll show you inside when we do that, in the gear lever itself, to lock that in place, and then you tighten the pinch bolt up, and then that should be your gear selector system adjusted and working right, so you can get all the gears. So I might have a look at that now, actually, because I think I'd rather get that done and out of the way before I put any more paraphernalia back around here, because I've got a little bit more access down there to do that. So we'll grab the new linkage and get that fitted. So you can see down here I've got the gear linkage in place. I've just got to secure that in with a little spring clips. And the little spring clips look like this, and they slide over the top of those pins. So let's put that one on, and I'll show you doing it. So that's just got a slip on there, like that. Positive snaps, that stops that pulling off. And I don't know if you can see the other one down there. So that's the joint there that we destroyed, right down there. And that's got to have the same little clip on top of it. That's going to go on. Because that pin was a bit damaged. Doesn't seem to want to go on, that one. Is it going on the right place? Possibly not, no. That's it, I think I've got it now. Okay, that's on. Looks a bit of a... It's not sitting quite right because the pin is a little bit damaged, but nothing pivots on that. It's just a sort of pulling off, and the fact that that one's on, it's not going to go anywhere. So this is the linkage end that's got to connect to the gearbox. So that goes in. That little nylon block goes in there, and then there's a pin that needs to go through that, which looks something like that. So if you remember when we took it out, we had to squeeze that little end in, and that released the pin. So I think it's just a case of hopefully pushing that back in. There it is. It's now back in, so that's connected up. And then we need to connect it to the rod down there in a minute. But first of all, I'm going to see if we can get this little locking pin to stay in. And like I say, now the linkage is on, we can trying to hold it with one hand and wiggle it with the other. So you can see that doesn't seem to want to do a lot at the minute, but I think the rods hold it in the place a little bit. I probably need to do two hands to do this, so that's obviously gone into A gear now. I don't know what that pin does, but I think you need to press the pin in at the same time as you're wiggling the mechanism about, so I'm going to do that off camera. So I'm just going to cut in here quickly, guys. The video footage of me actually setting up this gear change linkage wasn't particularly good, so I've stuck a photograph up. You can see arrowed now the gear change mechanism itself. What you need to do is you need to start with this in the neutral position and then rotate it clockwise against some spring pressure. You'll feel a little bit of pressure there towards the third gear position. At which point you should be able to push in that little spring-loaded plunger with the yellow tip that's arrowed now, and that will actually lock the gearbox into the right position, and the gear change mechanism obviously will then be in the right position for you to proceed with the next step. And that is obviously to align the gear lever inside the cabin, which we'll get onto now. Right, so I've retrieved the drill bit. Change of plan. I'm going to use a thin screwdriver through the holes to hold it in place, that way it's not going to drop through. So I'll get around there. So I'm just going to drop that through, get that lined up, drop it through. So now the gear stick is locked pretty much in place. Now we just need to go under the car and do up the pinch bolt. So I've done up the pinch bolt on the mechanism underneath. I'm going to pull that out and hopefully right, let's pop that little thing out. So I've got first, second, third, fourth, fifth and reverse. That feels a lot firmer. Does feel a lot better, so it's probably a good thing to have done. So I've just got to clip that trim back in, and that's another little job done. Right, so that's another job done. The gear linkage is all sorted out. I'm just going to go and start connecting up stuff. So there's pipes here to connect up, there's connectors here, there's cables to run there, battery box can go back in probably. That's the other end of the ECU cable there, so it's got to go over here somewhere. So I'm going to start routing all that stuff round, and then probably get onto the exhaust and the stuff at the front. Well, I think I might do that first actually, get that exhaust on. That's quite a big job. These little things, if I don't get it done today, can be done in the evenings after work. That's quite a big, possibly dirty job, so let's get that done first, eh? So that's just about it for this episode. Hope you've all enjoyed it. In the next video we will be fitting the exhaust system and a few other bits and pieces, and who knows, we might even get to start this this Astra engine for the very first time. So until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you in the next one.